All right, good morning, everybody. I hope you had a good Canada Day. Just to check, can some of you just confirm in the chat that you can hear me and see me? That would be good. Just to alleviate my paranoia. Perfect, thank you. All right, so today we are, where are we now? Thursday, July 2nd. Which, according to the schedule, means that we are talking mainly about Chapter 3. Those will have priority in the questions, but if there aren't any Chapter 3 questions, we can certainly go back and address other things that people may have. So don't feel restricted by Chapter 3, but I don't want to go past Chapter 3 in case you may be ahead of the game. So everything up to chapter 3, the session is there for you to answer any questions or get answers to any questions you may have. But it's totally up to you what your questions are. I don't have anything specific planned. When it comes to general problem solving, the exercises just give us a sort of an overview of different strategies you might. I hear my own echo. Just make sure you're muted if you're not using your microphone. Chapter 3, just different strategies that you can keep in mind. Uh, the topic of general problem solving is a big one. We try and contain the difficulty, and you'll see through the exercises in the video that it ranges from very straightforward to more involved, like the magic square one is more involved. Some logic ones as well mixed in, like a little trick question here and there. Now I will say that something like exercise 3.9 is again one of those just for fun questions, and a trick question won't be uh, in a quiz question. It's something that is good to see, like the classic problem, exercise 3.10. It's a nice question to see if you haven't already, but an exercise 3.10 question isn't an appropriate quiz question, I would say. Some are definitely more important for a quiz than others. So the main kinds of questions, if you're concerned about a quiz, would be, let me just think about the main kinds of questions. Certainly, arranging things like exercise 3.1 is a skill one should have. You should know how you're going to go through arrangements of digits that are all different or all, some are the same, whatever. The working backwards strategy is a very nice one to know and show an understanding of. So these could be quiz questions, definitely. Um, yeah, the round robin one is a little bit linked to the sum of uh, numbers we'll get to in a second. Then Magic Square, I think, is a little big for a quiz. It's something that you need time to work through and think about and understand how to ask a smaller question first instead of just racing to the answer. It's again that issue of working towards the answer and not worrying about the answer itself. Uh, so it's a good learning exercise. Then trick questions aren't really quiz questions. The two containers with water transferred between them trying to get a specific amount of water, that's a very nice question. that could be in a quiz. And then we have the sequences, adding up numbers in a sequence. Those are definitely important. And that's about it. So your main questions are working backwards, um, some of some numbers added together, the water jug container questions, working backwards has a lot of variety to it. And then we have the problems there. Some quite straightforward, some less straightforward. I will say problem 3.8 you might recognize, and 3.9 they are the sort of trick questions, not quiz questions in any way. But I like to leave them there because they're fun to think about, and you can ask it to someone else and see how they react. Those things are entertaining sometimes. It depends on your goal. Yeah, so there's a lot of variety, a lot of questions. I think everyone should definitely focus on eventually. You can decide how many of these problems you want to do, right? But a problem, not for any specific reason, because I know what's in the quiz or anything. I haven't set up the quizzes. But a problem 3.17 Chip and Dale question. That's a very nice test to see if you can slowly work backwards and carefully think because it's a little bit more involved. So it's a nice question to test yourself on. Like, can you stay patient and slowly work towards the answer, which is the skill we essentially want. And then there's some more variety here. Some little trick questions like the last couple, making a list, and so on. So I'm very much going on questions that you have. So this
Uh,
session is totally up to you. Yes.
Morning, Stephen. I was just wondering, could we discuss this problem 3.4? I was struggling with that a bit.
3.4. Yeah,
Yeah,
now it certainly depends on your experience. If you have a comfort level with algebra, those kinds of problems do become easier. But at this
mm-hmm,
stage, uh, I can go ahead and assume that you may not be comfortable with algebra. And if you
mm-hmm,
introduce a question like this in grade, okay, so we need multiplication concepts. So maybe grade 4, let's say, to be safe.
mm-hmm, yeah,
Then, of course, they don't have any concept of variables and anything.
mm-hmm,
So, what is a more basic strategy that could still allow me to confidently do a question like this? So, let's just read it. One number is 4 times as large as another number, and their sum is 5,285. What are the two numbers? So, now thinking like a grade 4 student, how can
mm-hmm,
I still make progress in a question like this? When I read this, I have no idea what the numbers are. And
yeah,
random guessing is certainly not going to be a strategy I can rely on either.
mm-hmm,
But the guess and check method is
yeah,
a good strategy if I give it some direction. I like to call it educated guessing and checking. It's not
mm-hmm,
random.
yeah,
Maybe my first one could be random, but
mm-hmm,
every guess tells me a little bit more about which direction I should be moving to make my next guess. And that's a
mm-hmm,
big difference. There's a big difference between that and random guessing. So let's
yeah,
say here I have my first number, I have my
mm-hmm,
second number. Now they say their sum is some target, so I want to add them up. Okay. So now, thinking as little Timmy, he's in grade 4. He reads this question. He has no idea. He's just going to randomly guess a number. Let's say 100.
mm-hmm,
But then he knows that the other number has to be 4 times as large. So, okay, so the other number is 400. So once I make my guess is really only this number one, then the other one is
Mhm.
fixed. I
Yeah.
add them up, I get 500. And
Mhm.
I compare that to, what was it? 285? Totally remembered wrong here. No,
5285.
285. So I'm comparing that to my target, which I see, oh, I'm way off. So that then
Mhm.
tells me that my first number needs to be increased quite significantly. So my next guess might be 1,000. I'm picking easy numbers because there's no need to be fancy. I'm just trying to
Mhm.
get to the right area here. So then my second number has to be 4,000 and my sum is 5,000. And then now I see, okay, well, just in two guesses, I'm getting very close here. So my next adjustment needs to be a smaller adjustment, but still bigger. So I'm not going to be as aggressive in my next guess. I'm just going to maybe go 1100. Smaller jump. Then my next then my other number that is connected to this one has to be 4 times as much, and I'm still picking easy ones, so I don't need a calculator or anything. And then if I add them up, I get 5,500. And then I see, ooh, no, I overshot it. It's a little bit too much. Sort of, my target is halfway between these. So then
Mhm.
it might take a while, and your guessing might be uh, a little bit more accurate than mine because you've seen something like this before. But I just keep going. Maybe I'll go 1,025, and then I have 4,100 because that's times 4.
Mhm.
And so when I add them up, I get 5,125. I see, okay, that was a little low. And I just keep going like this until eventually I go back and forth, overshooting it a little bit. The closer I get, the smaller my adjustments become. But an educated guess and check strategy would certainly be viable and wouldn't take that long. It's certainly something I have confidence in. It's just a matter of time, and I'm going to get the exact target I need to get. Uh, I'll leave the rest to you because what you guess could make it faster or slower. It's just a matter of time now. Once I
Won't
have
that
the
be very
strategy,
time consuming? Do you think the children will have that kind of patience to keep guessing it? And
well, I mean, we're trying to teach them to have patience as well, in a way.
Mhm.
Do they have it right away? Probably not. No. Do we
Mhm.
have it every time? No. Uh,
Yeah.
Part of this is to the biggest lesson I want to get out of it, if nothing else, is to have the patience slash confidence to know that if I have a strategy that works, it's just a matter of time. I don't mind chipping away at it. My concern is not being able to find the answer. If it's a little
But
slow,
don't
I don't mind that. That's okay. It's not a race. It's a matter
but
of
don't you
solving the
think,
problem.
yeah, at a certain age we should scaffold them and try to help them out to be successful in getting the answer, or
Yeah, but
just
how is
letting
this
them?
not successful? I'm totally gonna get the answer. Is it any show of, well, is it, am I inferior in any way by finding the answer a little slower than someone else? No, it makes no difference. It's a matter
Yeah.
of solving the problem or not, coming up with a strategy that gets me to the answer. Now, of course, there are more not that elaborate, fancier strategies that would get me to the
Mhm.
answer faster. But
Yeah.
for that, I need fancier concepts, and I might not be ready for that in grade 4. Like, I can't introduce algebra in grade 4. It won't stick, it
Mm.
won't work. So I have to scale my approach according to what I can handle at that stage. Then maybe in grade 7, or maybe 7 is ambitious, maybe
Mhm.
grade 7 or 8, you have
Yeah.
the concept of variables and equations super fast. But it depends on where
Yeah.
I'm at in that journey. I shouldn't
Yeah.
feel, if I'm not, if this is the strategy, I'd rather do a slower strategy, but something that I can understand and have confidence in. And if it takes me a little longer, the confidence and the security that that brings is way more valuable. And later on, I'll look back, oh, I was so silly. Look at this guess and check. I couldn't
Mm.
do it. I did. Now I know variables and equations are so much more efficient. But that's not any sign of weakness or anything. It's
But sorry, yeah,
yeah, you'll
yes,
continue.
Karen.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if we get a question like this during the quiz, we won't have that kind of time to solve it.
Oh, sure you
Keep
would.
trying.
You're worried too much. It's really not going to be a race at all. But
Yeah,
now for you solving the quiz question
yeah.
is different than you teaching a grade 4 student,
Mm-hmm.
right? In the quiz, you use whatever tools you have to do it. If you are confident with variables and equations, and we're discussing that at the end in part 4. But if you happen to have that skill already, you're welcome to set up equations and go nuts. It's still going to be correct. But even this, you're going to have 10 minutes on average per page.
Mm-hmm.
And if you give me 10 minutes to find this, I'll easily do it. There is no doubt. It just seems long, but we got pretty close. This is quite close already in like, it was barely a minute. If I didn't talk through this, this would not even take me a minute.
Can we
So,
solve it together, the
well,
class?
sure we could, but you can make some guesses too. Let me erase this dot thing here. Is it this one? Yeah. Let me just make some space here. I made some guesses. Oh, let's get rid of this line too. That's not the right answer yet. Now, of course, as soon as we talk about something, I'm waiting for you to make a guess, maybe, and the numbers become more complicated, perhaps, uh, to do it in my head fast. Of course, that's going to slow us down. If you were to do this on your own without speaking and waiting for other people, it'll be much faster. So excuse me, what do you want the next guess to be? We're a little under, so we want to have a higher guess, but we're getting really close, so we don't want to go too high. What would you say is a good guess? And it's a guess, right? I have no idea what the answer is. Honestly, I don't remember the answer. I want
Okay.
to explore it with you.
1500,
How much?
1000, 1500.
Okay,
We
1,500. That we can times by 4. Times this by 4, it's going to be 6,000, isn't it?
no,
See, that's way too much.
it's
It's
way too much, right?
but
Yes, sorry.
it's
Yeah,
sometimes
no, no, no. Yeah.
good to see. Okay, well,
Mm-hmm.
so if
We're
you look at
going
the size of the guesses we've had
255. Oh, yeah,
before,
I get that now. Actually, I didn't have my screen on earlier when you were explaining, so
oh, fair enough.
okay, I get, I
It's
get
going to be
that
a small
level. So it should
adjustment,
be less than 1100, right?
definitely, because 1100 was a
Yeah, it
significant.
gives you 5500, so it should be 1050.
And
Let me see. I'm
we're not
just,
looking for the exact number, right? We're just trying to
yeah,
guess. 1050, sure,
1050.
sure.
Yeah,
That's still something that I can do in my head. That's 5,200. Ooh, that's really close. Is this 5,200? No, 4,000. Ah,
I
1,000 times 4, 50 times
yeah,
4
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah,
4,200. Okay. So then I add them up, I get 5,250. So I'm closer. Oh yeah, I'm very,
yeah,
very close now. So the
yeah.
next
50 to
jump,
25, 1075.
1,075. Now look at the jump that I made from 5125
Yeah,
to 5250. I got my target. I increased my sum by 125, and I'm only 35 away. So another jump of 25 here in my
yeah.
guess would probably
Got me
overshoot it.
close.
I would
Uh,
jump by a lot, and I'm just only looking for a 35 jump. So the jump
yeah,
needs to get smaller and
20.
smaller, right?
Yeah, I get that. It's a 35 or
So
25 jump. I don't know if I got it right.
where my sum is so close, it's within 35.
50. Yeah,
So
I get that. I
maybe a
get that now.
60. I'm just guessing. I have no idea.
Okay,
Trying to pick easy numbers I can multiply in my head.
okay.
4,240. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's overshooting it. 5,300. Oh, I'm a little over.
Little
We're
lower,
close.
yeah.
So
You're,
it's between 1050 and 1060.
yeah.
And then it's just a matter of time, right? There's no need. You can totally
I
tell by
get
now.
that now. I
We've
get the
narrowed it down. The
strategy
window
now,
gets smaller
right?
and smaller and smaller. And really,
Okay,
if
I.
we, it seems long, it seems
Mm-hmm,
tedious because we are naturally impatient. Everyone is. Everyone just
yeah.
wants to jump, get that answer. But we
Mm-hmm,
get a lot of value from the journey. And yes, later on, if you learn some other mathematical concepts and techniques, yeah, sure, it
mm-hmm.
can be easier, of course. But that doesn't take value away from this strategy.
But during the quiz, you want us to just give us the way we can do
Yeah,
it. You
no, I
don't
mean, you're
expect
welcome to
us
do
to.
something like this. It's not going to specify use this method to solve this problem. It'll leave it open, whatever you decide, as long as you explain what you're doing. Yeah, and if you're saying, okay, I'm going to do guess and check, that is a strategy I don't want to overuse, but it has a
Mm-hmm,
place, especially in the starting, the early grades. It has a place. I don't want to rely on random guessing. Definitely
mm-hmm,
never want to do that. But
yeah.
a guess and check strategy has its place early on. I don't want to do it for too long,
Mm-hmm,
but it is there. It's useful. It has its moments. So if this is what you decide,
mm-hmm,
totally fine. You've explained what you're doing. It's all good.
yeah.
If you want to use another strategy because you happen to know some other options, as long as you
Mm-hmm.
explain it, it's all good. Yeah. I'm not
Okay.
going to
Then.
specify how you should do it. Same with these kinds of questions in problem 311, where you add up some numbers. If you want to use the formula that we introduced in
Mm-hmm,
the videos, you're welcome to do that, but you never have to use the formula. You could just
yeah.
list them and reverse them and add them up, and that's also a perfectly fine strategy. So I leave it open to you to do whatever you want to do. As long as you explain what you're doing, it's fine.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions?
Hi, Professor. I had a question about this problem again. I was just looking at the answer key for problem 3.4, and I know you used a different strategy. Could you just explain the strategy you used in the answer key for problem
I honestly
3.4?
don't even remember. I'm gonna have to go find it. Let's see if I can find it. The answer keys. I kind of prefer. It's a. Hold on. I can't speak and apparently open a folder. That's weird. Let me just find it here. Um, the answer key is sort of a catch-22 situation that I don't want to show answers because I don't want people to feel restricted that if their answer looks different than mine, then now they think, oh, I must be wrong. I don't want that to happen. But then when I don't give any answers, then people complain as well, and I can't win. There's no winning. What did I even do here? Whoa, that's too much scrolling. The sum of the two numbers is 5 times the smaller number. Yeah, right. Good. That's again, that's a little bit more advanced. If you've seen things like ratios before and you understand how to work with a 4-to-1 ratio and things like that, then there's another option. But in my experience, it if you haven't had that experience working with ratios yet, and again, that's gonna happen more in part four, then it's just gonna be confusing. And now when you see this, you're trying to adapt yourself to what you feel your way of thinking should be, when in fact you should approach it based on your experience and what you can handle at this stage and what you're comfortable with at this stage, instead of trying to conform to something else. Right? I was just at the time scribbling this for myself to have an answer. So you're only should be interested in the number 1057. How
Okay,
you
sure.
get
Thank
there
you.
is, I don't want you to feel restricted in any way. But with ratios, you often have, so the numbers here, it's a 1-to-4 ratio, right? 1-to-4, which means you're working with one part number one, 4 parts number 2. So there are 5 parts you're really working with, 5 little pieces. Number 1 will be one of those pieces, and number 2 will be 4 times as many. And then when you add them up, you're going to get 5 little pieces in the sum. In this sum here, we'll have 5 little pieces, all the same. And that's why I divide the sum here by 5 to find out what is that little piece. Turns out to be 1057, which has to be that number 1. But it depends. It depends on your experience, depends on what you're comfortable with. There are always, it's not a shortcut. There are always more efficient ways to do it. That doesn't mean we should do it that way. The, a slightly longer journey has as much value, if not more, to me perhaps. So I definitely don't want to look at these answer keys. I don't want to call them answer keys. I don't want to look at these scribbles and feel, oh, I did it a different way. Does that mean I'm wrong? No, not at all.
Okay, thanks so much.
I can't, yeah, I can't not put them on the website, and I don't really want to put them on the website, but use them with that understanding that it's not a teaching tool. It's really just, I got 1057 my way. Oh, it's 1057. Okay, good.
Okay.
The most important thing I would say is when it comes to the answers, just in terms of how you answer it, just make sure that your answer stands alone or is able to stand alone to a large degree, that you explained enough, whatever strategy, whatever way you want to solve it, you can explain it to a point that someone else reads the question and your answer and can follow that answer. If you ever have your answer only make sense when you're there to help explain and elaborate, then the written part is not enough. You need to show more and explain more. So as long as we explain our thinking and how we get to the answer, it's totally fine. Especially with something like the water jug container questions, you have to really show at every step, I'm transferring this to this, I'm dumping this, I'm filling this container one step at a time, like a recipe, so that someone else can read that and follow exactly what you were doing and say by the end, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I understand how you got it. So that's the most important with any of this is to write your answer in a detailed enough way that someone else can follow it as well. Alrighty. So if you haven't already, or if you're still catching up, I kind of just, I'm curious, how many of you are up to speed according to the schedule and have finished chapter 3, and how many of you are still trying to catch up? There's no wrong answer. I'm really just curious to know. There's no shame in admitting it one way or the other. Since the weekend is coming up, you're going to have a lot of time. The Monday, Tuesday time is a little tough. There's a lot of
Hi,
background.
Stephen.
Hello.
Hi, it's Ritu. Yeah, it's a little bit getting time to finish chapter 3, but I'm hoping I would be able to go through the problems by the end of this weekend. Thank you.
Good, good. Yeah, the weekend is definitely a catch-up time, a good catch-up
Yeah,
time. It's
thanks so
definitely,
much.
and we started a little slow too, but no, I'm just curious. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Chapter
your
three is big.
videos are, sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah, if we see the videos with the, like, when I'm reading the text, it makes it easier for me. But if I want to give time myself to like go through those problems, that's what I'm taking time.
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. And I
Otherwise,
don't want to
yes,
rush
fine.
to it. I definitely want to build up from understanding the exercises and only then do the problems. I've seen many times people rush to the problems way too fast, and then they're confused
Yeah.
with a problem 317. Like, I have no idea how to do it. Well, did you really just take the time and looked at the working backwards idea? I know they're
Mhm.
easier for sure, but if you look at
Yeah.
exercise 3.3, the same idea. Do I understand how I set up my table and
Mm-hmm.
what detail the table needs to have? And then I'm ready to try a problem. People rush
Yes,
to it way too much
absolutely.
and they do more damage that way. They think, oh, I'm trying to go fast. They end up taking longer because they keep having to come back to the exercises.
Yeah, because I was feeling that this is a golden opportunity that we can learn step by step. So I might be taking time, but I am doing it in a very organic way.
Yeah, I think that's way better. Yeah,
Thank you
definitely.
so much.
Uh, Problem 315 in the text, 315, oh, 314 part 2, I see. Because 315, I don't see a part. Let's see if we could zoom in here. I think we can fit 314 on one page. Let me just check before we come back to 314. Let me just see what everyone else is saying. Yeah, the weekend is a good time. Hopefully by the weekend, well, I would say, yeah. So in preparation for Monday, it would be really ideal to have caught up with chapter 4. Chapter 4, people find it have different experiences with chapter 4 and 5. Some no, not 4, 5. Chapter 4, I'll say while I'm thinking of this before I forget. You'll see chapter 4 isn't even in the schedule. It's just a for interest sake chapter, sort of where numbers sort of came from and the need for them and how the counting and the writing of the quantities developed. You can read that in your own time if you're curious. You can skip it. You're not going to miss anything. It doesn't matter. But if you, it's ideal to have chapter 5 done and ready with your questions for our Monday session. Otherwise, things are going to unravel fast next week, and that might be bad. Just while I'm thinking of that, let's get rid of that. Okay, so what else is in text? Yeah, definitely don't neglect the foundation. It feels maybe slower, but in the end, you have saved time. Uh, okay, so 314 first, and then 313. 314. Okay, so for 314, I really can't just do part two. It's uh, it's really connected because this I wouldn't call it a strategy. Well, yeah, a strategy. A strategy is to drawing 30 points and really doing it in a neat way to understand what I'm doing. It might be an impossible task for my drawing skills. So looking at a simpler problem with a smaller number is a good strategy to just get to understand the question and how would I solve a smaller question, and that then extends to the actual number two question. So I have 6 points on a circle, straight lines between all of them, and then I want to count the lines. Let's make a new space here. That should be fine. So problem 314. 6 points I can draw, I hope. Let's spread them out evenly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now I have straight lines between all of them. I don't even need to see them all. Let's just number this maybe point 1, point 2. The problem with having too many lines, I am going to get confused between them, right? So let's at the very least start drawing all the lines that are connected to point 1. Oops. Whoa. Something's happening with my drawing tool. I'll just freehand it. He doesn't want to draw today. Whee! Oh, now that's terrible. Wow. That's just embarrassing, isn't it? That's okay. I'm used to being embarrassed. Oh, it's connected. There we go. So I have my all my lines from point 1. So let's say here lines from point 1. I draw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. 5 lines. Now, when I look at lines connected to point 2, I'm really only looking at new lines because I don't want to count the same line twice, then I'm going to get a number that's way too big. So let's use a color. Now, if you've watched the video, you'd notice that this is the same as an exercise. I can't remember which one. So from point 2, the new lines are not as many. I'm not going to recount the line back to point 1 because I already have that counted. I only want to count once for each line. So new lines from point 2 would be 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'll do one more. New lines from point 3 would only go forward to point 4, 5, and 6. So then new lines from point 4 would only be 2 more. And from point 5 would only be 1 more. And from point 6, there aren't any lines. So I can break this up instead of just randomly counting lines. That would never end well. I can break this up by counting, by considering each point, and then I really have 5 plus 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 plus 0, and I can calculate that easily. Now the numbers aren't that big, so I don't need anything fancy. I could just do 9, 12, 14, 15. But my ultimate goal isn't this. My ultimate goal is, what if I have 30 points over here? So now this would keep going to point 30. How does this change? Well, now from point 1, I'm not going to have 5 points. How many points? Sorry. From point 1, I'm not going to have 5 lines. I now have 30 points arranged in a circle. It's just too messy to draw. How many lines will I have from point 1? This is where you say stuff.
Is it 29?
It is 29. Let me erase my question mark. Whoops, that was supposed to be a 9. Because when I had 6 points and I am at one of them, I only have one less point. So for each line. So one less than 30 is 29. From point 2, now I'm looking at pink lines. How many new lines would I have? And then you say
Would it be 28?
28. Go back here. There we go. 28. And you see the pattern is very obvious. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's just with more points, I have a larger starting number and it keeps going down. The next one's going to be 27. The pattern is quite obvious, but I've established that pattern and that thinking with a more manageable size question. 26, and then of course I'm now going to go all the way down to point 30, which is still going to stop at 0. The last point already has all the lines connected to it counted. There's no new line. So I'll do it over here. So my answer I can get by calculating 29 plus 28 plus 27 all the way down to 1 and 0. Now the 0 doesn't actually make a difference to the answer, so it's irrelevant. Maybe I like to write this in a different way. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus all the way to 29. Now you could do that one by one, but we have a better method to calculate a sum like this instead of doing it one at a time. That depends on you though. You have two options. You could write the sum, you could write it in reverse, you can add them up. Let me just demonstrate all your options so you know which one you would like. But but now it's a question of just figuring this out. So we could, one option is to write my sum, 1 plus 2 plus 3 all the way to 29. The more basic one, but it definitely works, there's no harm. Write the same sum backwards, 28, 27, down to 1, and then add them up in pairs to get 30, 30, every time the same. Then, how many of these do I have? Well, clearly I have 29 of them because this was the first one, this was the second one, this was the third one, 29th one. So 2 times that sum value is 29 groups of 30, 29 times 30. So the sum that I'm looking for is 29 times 30 divided by 2. Or you could, there's nothing wrong with that, and it really doesn't take that long once you're used to it. You could use a formula that says, and we've done that in the video in case you haven't gotten there yet, if I start 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 and so on, and I stop at some number, n, in this case 29, but it doesn't have to be any specific number, then this has a formula n times n plus 1 over 2. So now my value of n is 29, so the answer that I'm looking for is 29 times 29 plus 1, which is 30 over 2, and you see it's the same. So you can choose, maybe you like the formula, but just understand that the formula is very specific. Yes, there are other formulas, but there's no need to memorize them all. This formula works only if I start at 1 and my number increases by 1 every time. So it has to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, all the way to an end position. And then where I end plays a role in the formula itself. So it's a little bit more restrictive. This method on the left will work if I jump between, if I skip numbers, if I don't start at 1, it has a little bit more flexibility to handle more variety, but you can still choose whichever one you want. Any questions on this at least? Let me zoom out. So there's a couple of things happening here. A strategy that is so, I almost think it is the most important strategy when it comes to problem solving, is to look at something smaller, something manageable first, even if I'm just trying to see if I can understand the question. But I mean, it totally makes sense, right? If you're teaching addition, you're not going to jump in by adding 3-digit numbers if you're learning. You're going to start with small, 1 plus 2, then scale up, systematically building up from that foundation. The same thing is happening here. You're not going to jump in with a 30 points that you can't even draw and you have to sort of visualize and hope you're understanding it right. No, make it easier. Make sure you understand what's happening first with a smaller, more manageable number. And then in doing that, the strategy emerges usually. And then you just take that strategy and extend it to the bigger, more complicated situation. It's a very good part, a very important part of the stopping. Let's just stop and make this more manageable. And in doing that, often I understand the question better and I might even know how to answer it. And I didn't even have to do the full one. Then there is, or any questions or comments on this? I don't think there are. Doesn't seem to be. 313. 313. We're going backwards here. 313 is, how should I say? It's a little bit of a mix. Most of these are sort of mixed strategies. It's not, and I'm sure I've said that in the video as well. It's not like, oh, I have a working backwards strategy. That means I can only use that strategy and nothing else. Or I have a make a table strategy. That means I can only make a table and I can't do anything else. No, often the solution process has different parts to it. This as well. This has a make ask a simpler question first. Just because they're asking for who owes money or how much money, that doesn't mean that's the only thing I need to find. So I have 5 friends that decided to give a party, split the costs equally. Then they each spent different things. Al spent 475, Betty spent $12, and some more on vegetables. Carl spent 24 on pizza. Danny spent $6 on paper plates, $13 for the last person, and so on. Okay. If I just let's at least write their names. I'm not going to solve this completely because I suspect there are some people that still have to do these questions, and I don't want to ruin it, but I will discuss the strategy at least. And often
Yeah,
when we
I figured out like how much each person owe or needs to spend. So once they've split it equally, look, so I figured the
yes,
amount.
but not everyone has, so just give me a second. I don't think
Yeah.
everyone's looked at this. By asking, let me, what's that line doing there? 313. Who are the people? I'm just going to call them A, B, C, D because I don't remember their names. So let's say here, whatever the amounts were, right? 475. B is 1725. C is 24. D 6 and 13. 6 and 13. So if we add these up, what do we get? You could just tell me.
Oh, sorry, 65.
It'd be so
I
much
thought you didn't want
simpler.
me to say the answer, so.
Anyone can add that up in your head calculator, who cares? Uh, a smaller question first should be how much should each person be contributing?
Mhm,
So it's very similar to the sort of similar to the magic squares question. Ask a smaller question first. Each person should 65 divided by 5, so should
mhm,
spend or should contribute
13.
$13. And after that, correct me if you see something, but after that, it's just a matter of some guess and check, playing around, making adjustments. It's nothing really fancier than that. So the E person is already done. Ellen, what was her name? Ellen's already done.
Alan, yeah.
And then you can see, okay, well, the people that spend too much, that needs to get reduced and split
Mhm,
in some way to the other people. But exactly, I don't think you should look for any formula or any shortcut. How do I know how to split them up? No, just try something and it'll happen very quickly. So a little bit of guess and check, uh, I think is perfectly fine. I don't really think people should shy away from, let's just play with the numbers and tweak them a little bit. The question is small enough, the numbers are small enough, the splits are options are small enough, so that is a perfectly viable strategy. And don't feel that, oh, there's something that I'm missing because I don't see how to split them up. No, just try. Just start moving some amounts around, and it's going to happen very quickly.
Just the arrows in the answer key was just different from like how I
I
would
think
have
they're
split it.
backwards, aren't they?
Yeah, like that
Yeah,
didn't make sense to me. So that's
fair enough. Yeah. It's a good life lesson. Don't look at the answer key. Don't,
okay.
what's especially because we have a session like this. What's better? I would honestly recommend before you look at the answer key. Uh, First of all, we should have confidence in ourselves. This is the answer I found. This is my answer. Um,
Hmm.
but if the answer key confuses you and you don't even want to look at it, you could just send me, this is my attempt. Can you just look at it? Send it to me asking, can you just look at this? Does this look good? Is it clear enough? Is it explained correctly? And that's just, you get much more individualized feedback than an answer key that doesn't know what your needs are. I was just scribbling the answers as fast as I could.
Okay.
It's very detached from your answer and your issues and what confirmation you need. So feel free to just take a picture, send it to me, and then we
Hmm.
can easily identify if something's wrong. What is it? What do I need to say that it will help you the best? An answer key can't do any of that. It's kind of counterproductive to a large degree.
Thank you.
All right. So yeah, use those answer keys with a grain of salt. Know what you're getting into, and if you don't want to, just send me your answers. I can easily check them. Let's zoom out a little bit here. I've yeah, there has been semesters where I don't have the answer keys on the website, and then people complain as well. So I can't win. There's no winning. Um, yeah, I don't know what else. It's really up to you. What are there questions from earlier chapters?
I do have another question. Problem 3.21. I don't know if that's too far. I know
Which
some
one?
people haven't.
2.21, 3.
3.21, the latter one.
Oh, the latter one. All right. Yes, nice. 3.21, 21. Let's zoom in. I think it's easy to misread that one, but we could definitely do that and see. Sue stood on the middle rung of a ladder. She climbed up 3 rungs. What's happening here? Someone's brushing their teeth while. Not that I mind, it's very entertaining, but it's funny. Teeth brushing is important. She climbed up 3 rungs, moved down 5 rungs, and then climbed up 7 rungs. Then she climbed up the remaining 6 to reach the top of the ladder. How many rungs are in the ladder? So, of course, we're now assuming that you're building up from the exercises, and immediately I think it's very similar to the elevator one, where I just need to keep track. It's not working backwards, it's actually going forward. It's actually easier. I just need to keep track of how many steps were taken and then look back and see the bigger picture. So let's make a new page. Do we need a new page? No, no, we don't need a new page. Problem 321. So I need space though. Let's say the middle rung is over there. I don't know how big this ladder is. There she is on the middle rung. That's where she starts. Now she climbs up 3 rungs. So 1, 2, 3. So that's sort of a start. I want to keep track of this. Let's say step 1 or information or part 1. Let's say part 1. Maybe that's better. Maybe part 1 is better. Part 1. That's where she is. Then the next piece of information they give me, she moved down 5 rungs. So now I'm over here. So I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's where I am after part 2. How does it look so far? Everyone
Good.
good.
Yeah.
Okay. Part 2. So that's the 5 rung. Then she climbed up 7 rungs. It's just a matter of going slowly and keeping track of this. So she's standing on this currently bottom visible one. She's going up 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's where she is at part 3. She's standing on that line. Then she climbed up the remaining 6. So she climbed up 6 more. So from here, where she's standing at, our visible top is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that is I'll call it part 4, but that's the top.
Mm-hmm.
So now let me just highlight the top in the middle here. So the middle is this pink one, and the top is, we now know that one. So that means how many rungs are in between the top and the middle? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that means I need 10 black lines and then the bottom pink.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now it wasn't necessary to draw it, but I enjoyed it. And then the bottom, very uneven ladder. So then I double check the question. What do they actually want? How many rungs are in the ladder? Oh, okay, that's fine. Let's count them. Oh, I know there are 10 black ones.
Mm-hmm. So
The
13.
10 and 10, so total is 23.
Yeah.
So it's just, again, it's a test of patience, really. This question is asking, it's not really asking me about ladders, is it? It's asking me, am I patient enough to wait for the answer? That's really the challenge here. And that's the challenge for almost all of these questions. Am I patient enough to just work through it, knowing the answer is going to come? I have no concern about the answer if I just slowly work through it. But that is a skill. Whew, I don't know how one learns that skill. It's not easy. It's not easy.
Thank you.
Sure. But if there's one skill, it's to not sort of rush into something, to not be too quick. And that's true in general, not to get too philosophical, but that's true in life. Not to just rush in and make a rash decision or have a quick response, but just slow down and then everything will be much clearer. That's not easy. It's not easy to do. All right. Yeah, feel free if you have questions on chapter 2. That's also totally fine. Chapter 1, we said, was pretty much an introduction. Uh, in terms of the quiz, unless I don't think there's anything else right now in the chat, we did 313, right? Yes. Okay. In terms of the quiz, what you have to know from chapter 1 is what are the different forms of reasoning. Do you have an example? And what are, let's say, a pro and a con of each? That's really all that chapter 1 needs to give you. What's the pro and con of inductive reasoning? What's the pro and con of deductive reasoning? And then abductive reasoning was just an incorrect use of the deductive reasoning sort of template. And that is just not logically sound at all. And then when we get to chapter 2, we have the opportunity to look at statements specifically. And the negation is just a way to become more aware of what we're saying and reading, and not reading too much into a sentence, and not saying something other than what we mean, things like that. And then we got our puzzles, Guruji, Sudoku. One of those will definitely be on the quiz. Lady and the Tiger, definitely. But nothing different from the exercises and problems that we've seen. And then there's more variety in chapter 3, right? Which questions could it possibly be? But as you go through and look at our discussion, some questions are definitely more important than others. The working backwards one, uh, in some way, or slowly progressing. This latter one sort of falls into that category as well. Can I just slowly, systematically work through the explanation, whether it's forward or backwards? It's very important. The water jugs, nice one. Where's those numbers? So over here, over here. Can I calculate? Do I understand the strategies and my options for calculating uh, the sum of some numbers with an obvious pattern? They could start at 1, they might start at something else, they might be consecutive numbers, they could make consistent jumps. Do I know my options and can I explain that and how I find the answer? That's definitely very important. And then there's some variety. Uh, just can I just slow down and think about the question and the information? Maybe make a smaller one, smaller example first to help me. Some the basics of problem solving. You're not going to look at any of the quiz questions and ever think like, whoa, I had no idea this was going to be in the quiz. This is completely a surprise. That's never going to happen. It's there to test if you have a basic understanding of the concepts we introduced. It's not a lot of questions today, I see. Can everyone still hear me? I sometimes have the idea that I'm just talking to myself and my microphone actually went dead halfway through and everyone's waiting.
Yeah, Stephen, we can hear you.
All right. No one has any
Yeah.
questions?
Stephen,
It's a
I
good
think,
thing, I guess.
Stephen, I can ask you something.
Sure.
I just wondering when we do these jugs and water, this thing, it's
Yes, it's
like
not
I did
easy,
a
is
couple
it?
of them. So is it always like guesswork, or is there some kind of a strategy that can make me work through it a little faster than?
It definitely feels early on it feels like, oh, I'm just randomly doing stuff until I happen to stumble onto the answer.
Hmm.
That's not ideal. That's not really filling me with confidence going from one to the next. Like, if I see this question again, what am I going to do? I
Yeah.
definitely want to have some idea. Now, unfortunately, it's not going to be the best news when it comes to this question, but there is a way to give yourself some strategy. It's not perfect, but it is definitely much better than randomly transferring water. If we look at 315, I have 2 containers. Actually, should we look at the example maybe? It doesn't actually matter.
Actually, I did manage to finish them, but then I took a very long time. I was wondering I wouldn't have that kind of time
Yes,
during the quiz.
exactly.
So.
So what can we do? Oops, sorry. Let's look at the example since I don't think many, it's all the same. The numbers are just different. Not everyone has worked through this yet. So in the exercise, I have 2 containers. One holds 5 gallons and the other one holds 3 gallons. As much water as you want, transfer, do whatever you want. And I want to end up with exactly 4 gallons of water. Now it's very important to first understand the situation because it's not fully explained, because it's always the same and it's
Mhm.
explained in when we do the exercise that there are no markings on the containers.
Mhm.
There's no way to eyeball and know your quantity. You can only fill something up and know exactly how much water there is. So if we look at this, let's make a new page. Just if, yeah, so just to give us some guidance, how could one have some strategy? So let me just set this up. So this is exercise 3. What was this? 11. So I have a 3 and a 5, right? So I have, let's call this container 1. It holds 5 gallons. And the smaller con container 2, and that holds 3 gallons. So now I I don't want to just randomly start transferring water. I can dump water out, I can fill something, but I can't fill the 5-gallon container. I can't fill container 1 halfway and say, oh, I know exactly how much I have. So that's
Yeah.
what we're trying to avoid. So our goal is to have 4 gallons. Now we could ask, it's sort of a little bit of a working backwards strategy. How is it going to look at the very end? So the end scenario, let's say. What is the end scenario going to look like? The end scenario is going to look like container 1 having 4 gallons, and I don't really care about container 2. Let's say container 2 is empty. That is what it's going to look like because container 2 is too small to hold 4 gallons. I'm Any end scenario, however I got there, is going to look like this. There is no other way. I can't hold the 4 gallons in any other container. So now I can ask myself, well, what could it look like right before I have this end scenario? Where could this end scenario come from? So let's say, how should we say it? One step back. And the further I go backwards, of course, the more options I'm going to have. So are there different places that this end scenario can come from? Well, what are a couple of, I want to end with 4 gallons. So one scenario is I might have container 1 with 1 gallon and container 2 full. If I have this situation, then I can get to the end scenario and be done. Does everyone agree with that?
Yeah.
But that's not the only way. That's not the only way I can finish. I could also have container 1 full with 5 gallons and container 2 at
With
2
two.
gallons.
Yeah.
If I can come up with this situation, then I can also finish. Because as I transfer from container 1 to container 2, there's exactly space for 1 gallon. I'd be left with 4 gallons and be done. So now what I've done is I have a little bit of a wider net to try and aim for something. I'm not aiming for just one thing, the end scenario. I now aim for 2 things. And if I get either one of them, I know I can finish. So I'm sort of increasing my odds of getting, not randomly, sort of randomly. I'm increasing the odds of guessing my way to the answer. Because now instead of looking for one thing, I'm looking for 2 things. So I've increased my chances way more. And then you can go further. Now, it's up to you how far you want to go with this because it does get a little bit out of hand if you go too far, but maybe one more step you can do and say, okay, if I focus on step 1, in how many ways can I get to that situation? Is there something else I could aim for? Maybe a couple that if I get any one of them, I can get to number 1 and then I can finish. So then I'm making my net wider and wider and wider, aiming for a variety of things. Any one of them will be an automatic finish. If I look at trying to get to scenario 2 here, how can that be done? How can that be done? Can I get, what would it look like? What could it look like before I get to scenario 2? So for example, I claim that if I have a full 5 gallons, sorry, let me rephrase that. Let me just think. Yes, I'm just highlighting one. There are other, of course, in these question marks. And then empty container 2, there's others, of course, probably. I'll just focus on this one. If I get to, let's say, call it scenario 3, if I can somehow get to this, can you see how I can go from scenario 3 to scenario 2? Sorry, these arrows are backwards. While I'm erasing, you can think, how would I get from scenario 2, sorry, how would I get from scenario 3 to scenario 2? Can that be done? Remember, container 2 holds 3 gallons. So if I'm in scenario 3 with a full 5 gallons and an empty container 2, there's 3 gallons
Yeah.
of space in container 2. So if I transfer over from 1 to 2, I'm left with 2 gallons.
Yeah.
I then just transfer the 2 gallons over and full container 1 again, and bam, I'm in scenario 2, which
Mhm.
means I can finish. So, and scenario 3 is super easy, right? I just full container 1. So it was a little bit of a working backwards situation. I should have maybe done this differently. Hold on. I'm merging a couple of scenarios in this scenario 3. What technically happens, I guess. Let me just scroll up. What technically happens is I'm aiming for this. Oops, I'm in eraser mode. I'm technically aiming for this. And how can I get that? Well, I can have a full uh, 5
Yeah.
gallons and an empty container 2. Maybe that's a little bit more clear. Let me zoom out.
Yeah. Then we are left with 2 gallons in container 1. Yeah.
Because container 2 holds 3 gallons, I have 3
Yeah.
gallons of space. When I transfer it, I would be left with 2 gallons. Then I just move it over and full container 1 again. And then because that's one of my uh, goals, I know is one step away from finishing, I'm sort of aiming for something a little bit easier to spot. Now you could do the same for scenario 1 probably, I guess, and then see it's just a wider and wider net that if I get any of these guys, it's a couple of steps and I can finish. Instead of aiming for one thing, I aim for a couple. Now, in my experience, I don't really care about going further than just one step back from the end scenario to just have a couple of, probably just two possible targets instead of one makes it much easier for me, and that's usually sufficient. Just play around and get any one of these and then finish. Going another step back and having too many options, then I don't remember them all. That's
Mhm.
actually worse. So I find just one step back, and then I play around aiming for any one of them, and it usually doesn't take too long because I know if I now I'm aiming for two things instead of one, which is a huge improvement. So it's not simple, oh, formula, just do this. It's a little bit more tricky sometimes, but I think it's a scenario, it's a strategy that can give me some direction, and usually much more direction than I think. And if I then just start playing with it a little bit, I can keep two things in mind. I can keep these two goals in mind while I'm playing, but I can't necessarily hold five goals in mind while I'm transferring and playing. I forget what I'm aiming for.
Yeah,
So,
that gets complicated.
yeah, but
Like,
from one to two, I think that's, to me, that's manageable. And that usually does the trick. But no, it's not the easiest thing ever. In my
yeah.
experience, whenever a question like that is in the quiz, it's it's rare that people struggle with it. Time has never been an issue in my experience. If you've
Stephen,
sort of done
sorry.
your foundation, you've looked at these, you've worked through the problems that are similar, I think that sets us up well enough. Sorry, what were you
Stephen, I
saying?
have another question regarding the quiz. Like when I start solving it, there's some questions I know I'm like comfortable with if I don't take out the printout. So can I change the sequence of the questions and just put that like I've done this one first, but I
Oh
mark
yeah,
them
that
like
doesn't matter at all. Yeah,
that doesn't matter. Okay,
no.
because sometimes some questions are going to take longer, so you want to keep it for later, maybe
Yeah, I
whatever
mean,
works for.
that's a good strategy
Yeah.
to look through the quiz, look through a test, and see where do you want to start, build up that confidence and
Mhm.
stuff like that. My problem was whenever I took tests, if I ever looked through the test at the beginning and I found something that I wasn't confident about, I would
Yeah, you lose
obsess over that. I
confidence.
couldn't forget it. So now I'm
Yeah.
doing question one, but I'm thinking of that question seven. It's coming. What am I going to do? I don't know. I'm worried. And I mess up question one. So I could never
Yeah,
do that.
everyone has a different side. Like for me, if I have to do it, I would do the ones I know. At least I'm sure of that, and rest of the time I would try to struggle with whatever I don't know. So
Yeah. If you're
that's
able
why
to
I was
put
just wondering.
the difficult ones out of your mind temporarily, it's a good
Yeah.
strategy. I was never
Mhm.
able to do that.
No, I was just wondering about that because I generally do that. So.
Yeah, no, you could do the test in any order. The questions will be presented in the same order as we've done them.
Mhm.
So negation and those things will be early, and a chapter 3 question will be the last page. But you don't have to do it like that, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, let's have a look here. Exercise 3.7, I think, is the next question. What's 3.7? Oh, haha, nice. Uh, okay, so I can't remember exactly how effective the video discussion was, but so we have a certain convention, 100 politicians. Any politician was either crooked or honest, and we have two facts to work with. At least one of the politicians was honest, and given any two politicians, at least one of the two was crooked. What is the breakdown of the 100 politicians? Now, if I had to think, how do I approach something like this if I don't have any, I don't say intuition, but any experience with something similar, like it's a brand new question, I don't know how to approach this. What am I have to do something. What could I do? Well, just look at all your options for what the answer could be. I only have 100 people, right? My options for what the answer is, the options aren't that many.
I think Stephen, you have something in the video which is very similar to this
Yeah,
one.
I know. But everyone's asking about exercises. There are no other questions. So I'm just
Okay.
doing that. If someone has a question about problems, yes, we will prioritize that because the video is the same.
Okay.
But until that happens, I'm just filling the air, really. But you're right, it is exactly in the video. Um,
Mhm.
I don't know, sometimes the camera is a weird angle in the video. I need to fix some of them. Or maybe there's some audio issues. I don't know. I'll do it anyway. But no, if someone has a problem question, we should do those instead. Yeah. but I don't see any of that yet. Yeah.
I could totally just watch the video again. Like, that's not a problem.
That's true. But I'll at least give you a guide because I can't remember the wording I use in the video. We don't have that many options. What are the options really? If I break it down like this, let's say honest and crooked. What are the options? Well, it's 0 or 100, 1 or 99, 2, 98, and so on until we get to 99 on one side, 1 on the other, 100 and 0. Now, it seems like a lot, but you'll see the middle will all be the same. You just have to look at the extremes. So if you literally look at every one of these five, it should reveal itself. And you're just really testing. So it's sort of like Lady and the Tiger, I guess, in a way. List all the possibilities. How does each row match with the two facts that are given? So for example, if I look at 0, 1, I'm looking at the first row, 0 honest, 100 crooked. These two facts have to be true. At least one of the politicians was honest. No, I have 0, so that's not possible. And then I keep going. Now, you'll see in the middle, they're all going to be the same argument. Uh, but that's a strategy that can give me some direction. And then as I go through these, I'll quickly see why they don't work and which one is the only one that could work. So that's one thing. And I just want to be aware of the at least one means one or more. One or more. Given any two. So I have to be able to take any two people. Among those two, one or more of them will be crooked. So sometimes a common issue with this specific question is that I might read that second fact. I might read that sentence too fast, and I don't really understand what it's saying. And then I can't quite check my options effectively. So make sure that you understand that second fact uh,
Okay.
well before moving on. But then, if you watch the video again, doesn't make sense, definitely let me know. Um, don't ever look at something and say, I don't know. I'm not gonna ask. It'll just fix itself. It's not gonna fix itself. We have to actively do something. So don't hesitate to
Yeah, I
ask
can just
again.
watch it again. Not a problem. Thank you.
What is 3.5? 3.5, I'm going to leave to the video. Absolutely. That is uh, done sufficiently in the video. I know that. I think people come up and try it, and yeah. It's, I guess, in a way, a trick question that once you see it, it's over. It's teaching you one thing, and that's it. And I'm not going to ruin that here. Then next up, we have problem 216. 216. Ooh. 216, where are you? 2, 2. No, we already talked about 216. Feel free to ignore it. It creates, in hindsight, it creates confusion by trying to be too detailed in little steps. But we can talk about it and read through it, sure. But it's not a complete question in a way that the others are. Oopsie. But until there are other questions, I suppose I could. So I see three matchboxes. One contains two red marbles. Maybe the font's too small here. Can I make it a little bigger? It's either no. There we go. That's better. One matchbox contains two red marbles. One contains two white marbles, and one contains a red marble and a white marble. The labels telling the contents of the boxes have been switched. However, yeah, so that the label on each box is wrong. So I can't trust the label at all. You're permitted to choose one box and open it far enough to see one marble. The challenge is to explain how you can figure out from this what is in each box. So now it's guiding me systematically through the different ones I happen to randomly pick.
Stephen, I have a question here.
Yeah.
Like it says, the those labels were switched, so there's no chance that any of the labels are correct, right? That's what we assume.
Um, I don't. Oh, I don't know if
Because
I
then
want to
it gives
rely
us
on
less
that. Yeah, you're
options.
right. Let's suppose we don't even have that information. Because if someone says I shuffled the labels randomly, then I don't know if a label says too red, it's necessarily not too red. Let's go
Yeah,
even further and say I have no idea. They could be shuffled and some might be correct, some might be wrong. I can't trust anything. So I
yeah,
can't even trust that it's wrong.
yeah. That gives us less options then,
Yeah, yeah. So I think in this question, I can't even do that. So it's as general as it could be. So it's really just box one, two, and three, and I have the options of what is behind them in general, but I don't know. The labels mean absolutely nothing. This could have just said, suppose I choose the box labeled box one. I have no idea. So at least that's how I remember it. I'm not sure. Okay, so if I open a box, or maybe you're right. I don't remember. If you opened it and saw a red marble, what color would the other marble have to be, and how do you know? No, I think you're right. I think they
yeah.
have
That's what.
literally been switched. So whatever the label
Yeah,
says, I know it's not. You're right. You're
exactly.
right. Yeah.
That's what when I solved it, I
Yeah.
felt that
I
if
have to.
I, yeah, it just reduces my options of solving it.
I don't think we can
Yeah,
solve it without that in the
yeah,
way it's phrased. Yeah.
yeah. That's
Yeah,
exactly what
no,
I
no,
was
no, you're
doing.
right, you're right. I don't remember this question, obviously.
Mm.
So if I open it and see a red marble, then I know the other one's white because it can't be this label.
Yeah,
Right. If you open it and saw a white marble, yeah, that's tricky. The other one could be red or white, so I don't really know. All I know is it's not both red. So I'm hoping for a red marble. Yeah. Now suppose I choose the box labeled to white. If I open it and saw a white marble, that helps me a lot. Then I know the other one is not white, the other one's red. So I would know exactly which one I have. But if I open it and saw a red marble, then I don't know the color of the other one, unfortunately. Okay, suppose that I choose the box labeled one red and one white. If you open it and saw a red marble, what can you conclude? The other one has to be red because they're not a mix. It's not what the label says. If you open it and saw a white marble, the other one can't be white. Sorry, the other one has to be white because they're not a mix. So if I look back, I see that if I pick the label too red or too white, then it's a little 50-50. In some cases, I would know what the content will be, but if I see something else, I might not know for sure. Whereas if I choose the one red, one white label, regardless of what I see, I'm going to know what's inside the box. So that one is the best option to open and peek inside. But as I said, this isn't a complete question. It's more sort of guiding me through a logical thinking exercise, really. It's not a problem that you would see in a quiz. No, it's not. It's not. All right, we have that was 216. Oh, did I catch up to all the exercises? Awesome. Perfect. With 1 minute to go. So yeah, I mean, in hindsight, I like reading through problem 216, But it does seem to create a lot of confusion. Like, I don't understand what's happening here because we don't really see a question. It's more just walking me through the way of thinking. Like, if you have these boxes in front of you, how would you know which one to go for, which one to open, and why? Because only one of them will have 100% certainty of you knowing all the information. So it's just sort of trying to hold my hand and systematically guide me through that thought process. All right, so now you have a weekend to try and catch up with up to chapter 3 and prepare chapter 5, Roman numbers. Now, some of you might have experience in Roman numbers, which does make it easier, but regardless, we're sort of shifting our focus now in part 2 to number systems and what they looked like. Some of them looked like back in history, how that can help us better understand and teach our current number system. That will be what part 2 is all about. All right, I will leave you to it. Feel free to email or chat if you have, and on Discord if you have any questions. Maybe, and definitely, I would use. I don't know why people don't use really the course specific chat channel, because maybe you have a question and someone else has the same question, and not that you have to help each other. I'll have a look, and it's nice to have a discussion. So use Discord if you feel like it. There's a lot of benefits to not feel isolated and understand other people are probably looking at the same problems and having the same questions, and it feels better that way. All right, I will leave you to it. Have a
Excuse
good
me?
weekend. No, you can't wait until 10:32 and then start asking your questions. That's not fair. I have other appointments and things happening too. So any other questions you're gonna have to do by
No,
email, okay?
sorry, I don't have the question. I just want to confirm about the assignment, how to give you the assignment.
Just by email.
Because,
You just scan it
okay,
and send it back.
okay.
All right. All right. Until later.